Good afternoon, everybody, and happy Halloween. Welcome to Responding to Sources Sought, ghosting your response to influence acquisition. I am your moderator, Sally Clark. I am with AFG Group. We are a construction management firm out of the DC area with offices along the East Coast. We are a woman-owned small business, and with that, I am also on the Small Business Council as the Vice Chair-elect for conferences. I'm also the Vice President of the Mid-Maryland Post, so if you are interested in joining the Mid-Maryland group, we are a lovely, fun group of people and can be found on all of your social media sites. All right, so before I introduce our esteemed speaker, I have a few notes to share. Please take note of the emergency exits. Also, please silence your mobile devices. And I would like to thank our sponsors for this conference. Without them, we would not be able to make all of this happen. This, as many of you have noted, is the largest SBC conference as of yet. You can earn 1 PDH by attending this session. So Leanne was in the back scanning badges. She said that her scanner went out in the middle. So some of you may want to go back and get rescanned as you are leaving the session so that you can get credit for it. Also, this is a way of self-reporting your PDHs. Presentation for this session will be available on the SAME SBC website next week. And lastly, as you've heard, this session is being audio recorded. As such, if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and I will come to you with a microphone. Please state your name and your company and ask your question into the mic and don't speak quickly. We would like your question adequately captured on the recording. The recordings will be made available and are free to all attendees, and you will receive an email with how to access the content. With that, let me introduce Joshua Frank. He is the managing partner of RSM Federal. He is also the author of the Government Sales Manual. Mr. Frank was awarded the SBA Veteran Business of the Year and also the Industry Small Business Advocate of the Year by SAME. Please join me in welcoming Joshua Frank.
Thanks. First of all, the fact that you made it to this room, sort of like marketing, every click on a website, you're going to lose someone. So the fact that we have this many people here on Halloween at 4 p.m. is awesome, so thank you. Real quick question, how many of you are small business? Raise your hand. Most, good. Large companies? Excellent. Government? Contracting officers, specialists, program managers? Excellent. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move really fast, okay? There's a lot of content I want to get through. I am going to be here Thursday, all Friday through 7 o'clock. So if you have questions and I don't move fast enough and we need to do some Q&A offline, I'll give you my phone number, just text me and I'll let you know where I'm at. So I am with RSM. I've been in this market for 28 years. I'm a former intel officer. For all of you that are veterans, raise your hand. Thank you for your service. I'm a huge small business advocate. I'm chairman of the board for the Veterans Business Resource Center, the VBOC, for Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska. I support SBA with a whole bunch of different stuff, including emerging leaders. But my specialty is technique and strategy, okay? The techniques and strategies that I'm going to go through, if I convince only one of you today to change how you respond to a sources sought, I will have been successful, okay? This is going to be basic to advanced concepts. It's not simply how do you respond to a sources sought, it's how do you strategically consider, think about, and position that response, okay? This is an hour. I'm going to try to do 10 minutes Q&A. We'll skip agenda. We'll get into it. For those of you who are going to leave early Write down that URL, rsmfederal.com/SAME. There are a couple of items. One, first of all, an email went out to all of you. Most of you probably didn't get it, probably went to your spam. We gave the manual away pre-conference. If you did not get that, it's a 460-page manual, okay? It's not a book, it's a manual. If you're in the session, it's yours, okay? You'll get the slides there. The slides on the server are not the same ones you're going to see here today. The only people that get the complete slides are the ones that come to my sessions, okay? And then 3, I'm going to walk through the sources sought response briefly. That template is free. You can download, okay? There's a lot of stuff that I'm giving you at the end of the session. So when you respond to a sources sought, you have 3 objectives, right? You want to differentiate your company. We all talk about that. But you want to marginalize and bar entry to your competition. It's not enough to say, yes, we're SDVUSB. Yes, we're woman-owned. Yes, we're good at what we do, right? Here's our DUNS number. Yeah, the NAICS code is fine, right? That's not enough. You want to be responding in a way that prevents your competition from being able to bid on the acquisition. We'll talk about that today. And then obviously you want to influence, okay? Most companies simply answer. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but most of us, okay, there's 5 questions. Answer the 5 questions, send it in. It takes 5 minutes, right? We have a template, right? In our library, we have a template of what a sources sought is. Just copy and paste a whole bunch of stuff, throw it in. You're not doing yourself any service doing that, okay? And we'll walk through that. So real quick, refresh on the basics. Where do most companies focus? Especially small businesses. We focus on FBO. eBuy if you have a GSA schedule, NECO for the Navy. All the acquisition systems, the bid matching tools, 80%. And if that's what you do, you're not going to win a lot of contracts. 80% of your time you should be positioning. And for those of you that go, Josh, I don't know who to call. Even if I call, they're not picking up the phone. I can't get in the door. Well, those are business development and capture challenges, right? But 80% of your time should be focused on solving those challenges, of which RFIs, look at it, ooh, a green, it's normally red. Small things make me happy. Sources sought is a part of that. I go off on tangents. How many of you have ever seen me speak before? Raise your hand. All right, there's a good number. I love to go off on tangents, go down the rabbit hole, okay? This is one of them. Yeah, we're talking about sources sought, but from a pure prospecting, business development, sales, capture, whatever buzzword you want to use, your focus needs to be pre-acquisition, not the acquisition phase. And if you go, what is that? Well, I'll get to that in a sec. When you look at FedBizOps, this is sometimes an eye-opener. If you're in your first year or 2 in the government, only 10% of the opportunities you could be winning are online, right? That 10%, that 9 and that 1 right there, right? That's your acquisition. 1, that's your sources sought. 90%, they know they need what you sell, but they're not currently focused on it, or they don't even know they need your solution, okay? So for those of you that are just every morning spending hours looking at FedBizOps and your bid matching tool, if you got one through the PTAC, or you pay thousands upon thousands of dollars with those big, 800-pound gorilla companies, you're still only getting that 10%. That's why focusing in pre-acquisition is so important. Sorry, big tangent. So, to beat this into you, sources sought are critical because it's pre-acquisition. Your phone, your face-to-face, RFPs, RFQs, it is really difficult to influence the acquisition. You can't shape anything. The requirements are already out. And so that's why this is a long lead up into the sources sought discussion, but I want to make it very clear how important those sources sought are, Another rabbit hole for those of you that have only been in for a year or two. Understanding the difference between your focus in pre-acquisition versus acquisition also means you know when to ask questions. Because that line, everything you ask, your competition is going to find out. Give you a perfect example. If it's a source of sought, and you say to yourself, oh, they're looking for this service, or they're looking for this product. You know, if we knew a little bit more about this federal agency, or a little bit more about this armed service, maybe if we positioned our past performance a certain way, we could influence the acquisition and be more competitive. So what do? You want to call someone, you want to collect intelligence and information, and you get somebody on the government on the phone, and if it's sources sought period, they cannot share your question or the answers they give you with anybody else. If you make the mistake, and a lot of companies do, they try to do it during the RFP, RFQ, the government is required by the Federal Acquisition Reg to share questions and answers, right, after an RFP or RFQ has been released. Your entire strategy you're trying to put in place is now being shared with your competition. It's a long way of saying, make sure you know where that line is, so you know when you're asking questions. This is still part of the setup. This slide is a webinar all unto itself, or a seminar all unto itself. I put it in here because I want you to have it when you get the slides. There are weak, viable, and strong ways of selling. Sources sought falls into this. The weak, there's your Fed Biz Ops, right? The reason why there are these danger signs, because if that's all you do, you're not going to win a lot of contracts, right? I'm not going to go through all of them. Viable, yeah, you've got your PTAX, other folks, your FPDS, USA Spend. How many of you use FPDS? Raise your hand. There are so few of you that just raised your hands, okay? If you don't know what FPDS is, you must find out. That is where all the government contract data is stored. And if you say, well, I use usaspending.gov, usaspending.gov has about 180 of the 280 fields that are in FPDS. Learn to use FPDS. That's who buys what you sell, how much they buy, and how often they buy it. FPDS is critical to your overall sales strategy, at least getting it off the ground. So these are all weak and viable. Strong, there are 3 things you must do to win government contracts. I've worked with thousands of companies. The 3 are, you have to have a really strong teaming strategy. You got to meet and talk with the government and get away from, get out from behind your computer, right? And engaging pre-acquisition. Sources sought. Okay? Again, this slide is, so you can do, I'll finish going down the rabbit hole. You can do all these, or all of these, or some of them, but unless you do those 3, you are unlikely to win a bunch of government contracts. There I go, going off on a tangent again. So why does the government do market research, right? Well, yes, they want technical capability, your background, certifications, QA, QC, right? We all sort of know that. There are differences, right? And by the way, for those of you, this pre-solicitation draft RFP, if you didn't realize this, but within FBO, those are all small business. Almost all of them are small business set-asides, okay? So it's a great way of looking through the opportunities. RFIs and sources sought, yes, they have different objectives, but for the most part, they're fairly similar when you see them online. Obviously, I'm not going to start reading FAR Part 10, other stuff, but the sources sought is specific for small business. It is specifically to identify whether there are 2 or more small companies that can do the work, successfully do the work. when we talk about these NAICS codes, now this isn't a great example because I think that has the same dollar amount. This is the first strategy in responding to a source assault. I want you guys to imagine for a minute, some of you probably have 20 NAICS codes, right, in your SAM profile. And when you look at a source assault, it says, well, it's going to release it under this NAICS code. And you say to yourself, I got it, and you move on. But there are some NAICS codes that are used for the same product or the same service. And you would know what those are based on what products or services you sell. But if there are two NAICS codes that the government procures your product or service under, and one has a small business threshold of 7.5 million, and the other is 15, which one do you want the government to use if you're a $6 million company, right? So ensure, obviously if you are a $10 million company, you're going to go, you really need to use this NAICS code, right? And the reason why is because government's done, over 30,000 procurements under this NAICS code, of which so many were done in the last year, totaling $250 million. Do your research and try to convince the contracting officer that it should be released under a certain code. But for all of you that are small, make sure that if there is another NAICS code they could be using, tell them to use it so that you can eliminate and bar entry to some of those larger companies. Okay? Again, contracting officer, they're not going to share any of your stuff. But even though that's the case, this is another tangent I'll go down. Every single document that comes out of your email system needs to have business sensitive and confidential. Everything. Protests are, most of the large companies have built protest into their capture cycle, right? It's not a question of do you protest, you do every single time. Now, they're trying to fix it and now they're trying to charge you, for protesting. But if there's a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, and we're human, even contracting officers are human, they may accidentally grab some of your paperwork and share something with competition. So make sure, even though they're not obligated, make sure you have business sensitive, confidential on everything you send out. Business intelligence. It's all drilled into our heads that, and by the way, since this is being recorded, which is good, if you have a meeting with a prospect, you have 3 objectives. One of which is not to sell your products or services. Your objectives are to build rapport, communicate that you're a subject matter expert, and the most important, collect intelligence and information. You don't want to be the one talking the entire time when you're meeting with someone with the government. You want them talking. The more you learn from them, the more competitive you'll be. The more information you have to properly respond to a source assault or an RFP or RFQ when it's released. And so we are trained as business professionals in public sector to collect information, right? Because that makes us more competitive. What I want to start you down the road of today is you need to start ghosting requirements and pushing intelligence back to the government in order to influence the acquisition so that they do what you want, you're more competitive, and the other companies are barred entry or are not as competitive. By the way, they know you're doing it. It's not a secret, right? They know what you're trying to do. But if you do it correctly, they'll go, yes, you know what, this really is a good idea. We're going to go ahead and stick it in. And when you ghost requirements, and we're going to go through examples, I'm going to actually give you real world examples of how this is done. Your objective is that they take one, hopefully two, but definitely one of your ghosted requirements and they build it into the statement of work. They build it into the RFP, they build it into the RFQ. If you get more than one, that's a home run. We already talked about this is the best time to shape, right? Another tangent. This is when you start teaming agreements. You don't wait for the RFP or the RFQ to be released. If you're going to team with another company, whether you're priming or subbing, when that source of sought hits, that's when you initiate the TA process. Okay? Because you'll be able to get the companies you want. If you wait, most of the teams will already be set up by the time the RFP, RFQ hits. And if you talk to the big companies, they're setting their teams up a year, sometimes two, before an opportunity gets released. Okay? As small businesses, cash flow is king, right? It's always a challenge for us. You have got to go to an industry day. Somebody on that team has to go. And if you're the prime, you must go. You must, because of the intelligence that you're going to collect. Okay? It's a little tongue-in-cheek, but I have spoken to hundreds of contracting officers over the years. And this goes towards it. Obviously, you're not going to buy a car without a test drive. And so if you purposely skip, the bottom line is, it is either, you have either qualified this opportunity in that source of sought, or you haven't, okay? And if it's even partially qualified, you must respond to it if you plan on going after it, okay? How many of you, I'm going to ask for a show of hands now, how many of you have passed on a source of sought because you're like, I'm just too busy, I'm putting out a fire, whatever it is? Show of hands, how many of you? A lot, right? Most of us. We pass on a source of sought, we go, well, you know what? Someone else is going to do it. Contracting officers, and there's always several in my sessions, and they go, yeah. Does anybody here know how much money, I don't have 18 numbers, for 2017, does anybody know how much money in acquisitions and contracts awarded in FY17 went to large companies because no smalls responded to the source of sought? Throw out a number. Anybody? Jeez, I hope not. $20 billion. $20 billion. These contracting officers wanted to give it to you. Okay? Small business community in general. And either one or none responded because everybody else said we're too busy. We didn't respond. And so this is the process for the contracting officers, right? Source of sought is market survey. I'm going to release full and open. I'm going to do it on schedule under this NAICS because nobody's interested in the small business community. So the next time you think, well, I'm too busy, somebody else will respond, recognize those contracting officers are just pulling their hair out. They're trying to give small companies contracts, but you're not responding to the source of sought. And now you have to compete with the big boys, with the larger companies. So don't pass them up. Even if that means you take 5 minutes. I don't recommend this all the time, but if it's 5 minutes and you just scramble something together, you know, and just put on the back a whole bunch of past performance summaries, send something in, okay? Let's talk about what they ask for. Most companies, many of you probably, hopefully not after today, you simply give them what they ask for. You just answer the questions. What you need to do, you need to talk to them about their strategy, their next codes, small versus large, and that's just the start. Normally, a source of sought, you're going to have almost, how many of you have responded to a source of sought where the requirements, it's this long and they go, send us whatever you can, right? It's very common. It's either that or it's 15 pages of data. right? Which I think is obnoxious, right? Again, I already hit the business sensitive. You're not going to get it back. What should you do 24 hours after you send in a source of sought? Anybody? Just yell it out. What should you do after you send one in? Follow up. It's a great opportunity to collect intelligence. Don't do email follow-up first. Don't be lazy. Do a phone call, because that way you can ask questions. Everything is about intelligence. Everything is about intelligence and being more competitive, okay? This is what most of us, a lot of us will see. And then you got a 15-pager. They're all pretty much the same. They're trying to validate a strategy. What do they ask for? Obviously, and by the way, if they don't ask for a narrative summary, give it to them. If they don't ask for past performance, write-ups, some of them say, hey, just let us know, do you have this past performance? And a lot of companies go, yeah, we've done this. We did this for the Army. We did it for the Corps. Did it for the Navy. Actual give past performance write-ups, okay? Because if you don't, let's say the contracting officer gets 3 or 4 responses, and they're looking for a certain level of capability and competence, and nobody actually did anything but give this, they may say, we thought of giving it to small, but we really can't confirm that these smalls are capable and large enough to do it. So even if they don't ask for it, give it to them. CAPE statement, I personally believe are one of the most overused, misunderstood products in the government space. Okay? That's for another day, but I do believe put it on the back. Don't attach it as a separate document when you send your source of sought in. Actually create one PDF and stick it on the back so they don't just immediately delete it, right? And I'm not going to go through the rest. I'm going to talk about the ROM in a minute. First of all, if you respond to a source of sought, you do not have to answer any of their questions. You don't have to answer all of them. There is nothing in the Federal Acquisition Reg. This is not the acquisition cycle. If there's a question that you think will look unfavorably for you or your company, then don't answer it. You cannot be non-responsive in a source of sought response. You can only be non-responsive in an RFP or an RFQ in your proposal. Okay? So if you don't like a certain question and you're like, man, if I answer this, they're definitely not going to want to give it to, small business or 8A or what have you, or you don't want to plant a seed that you may be weak in a certain area, then don't answer it. You can't get in trouble for it, right? You are either going to confirm the acquisition strategy that the government is looking for, or you will change it. And your objective today with this session is to change it. Okay? You don't win anything. They can't hold you. This next one, how many of you have been asked to do a rough order of magnitude? Okay? There's a good number. For those of you that have done a ROM, did you know what their budget was before you gave the ROM? No, you don't, right? Contracting officers over the last several years come up to me afterwards and they go, Josh, I freaking hate with a passion that you're telling small businesses to do this. But from a business perspective, I totally get it. Don't ever give an accurate ROM as part of a source of sought. What if their budget, right? Their budget, let's say it's $200,000. It's $1 million, whatever it is. We'll call it $200,000. And you're going to bid, to do it right, to do it well, it'll be $250K. If all the small companies come out and they go, yeah, it's about $250, $275, maybe 225. Government may go, you know what? We just can't get the pricing, the competitive pricing we need with a small business. Lowball it. You can't be held to it. I'm recommending you lowball your rough order of magnitude. Okay? Take 25% off. It doesn't matter, because when the RFP or the RFQ comes out, you're going to have to give your pricing again. And you're either going to be competitive or you won't. And hopefully, between having to give a ROM with the source of SOT and the RFP actually coming out, you're going to be focused on figuring out what their budget is, right? So don't give accurate ROMs. That source of SOT is a negotiation. Okay? That's how you need to think about it. And so they want everything you have. You don't have to give them everything you have. Your job is not to make their job easier. I am not anti-government, okay? I'm not anti-contracting officer. I understand the government side and I understand the business side, right? And for small businesses, if it's not in your favor, don't do it. Now, how many of you have, without reading my slide, stop looking, stop. How many of you have seen a source of SOT on FBO and it's a week late and you're like, oh, I missed that source of SOT, right? All of us. There is nothing in the federal acquisition reg that says you must, or the government must maintain that timeline. Most contracting officers who receive a response to a source of SOT 7 or even 14 days after the due date will email a response back to you and go, thank you. And they will review it. So don't look at the suspense date. If you miss one on FBO, and it's only a couple of days or a week or two, I've seen some that are 3-4 weeks, and they're accepted. So don't lose track of that. Past performance. Again, you're going to put your past performance in your source of SOT response, no question about it, right? Every single time. Do I have to look special? There we go. All right. So, but when it comes to points of contact, right? Contract information, phone numbers, you're going to give that, obviously, right? But what if you're a subcontractor? Pay attention. If you're a subcontractor and the prime says to you, hey, as part of the response, we're using your past performance. Oh yeah, absolutely. Hey, I need all the, who's the contracting officer, the COR, I need the phone numbers, dollar amount, period of performance, blah, 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 right? And what do most small companies do? They give it to the prime. This is how companies steal work from other companies, folks. Now, RFP or RFQ is different, okay? Source is sought, you should send that in separately. Hey, prime, totally get it. I'll give you some of the baseline, but we have a corporate policy that we do not provide that information unless we're in the acquisition phase. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay? Just be careful. And then we get to ghosting. Ghosting, simply a process influencing the requirements of your strengths and the weaknesses of your competition, right? And you do that, I'm not going to read all the words here, but you're doing it to marginalize, bar entry, or decrease perceived effectiveness. What if you know one of your competitors has an issue with one of their processes or a challenge with one of their products that you know you don't have? Even if it's a perceived issue and it's not an actual issue, but it's perceived, if you can float it, sort of like the leadership of this country. I'm not going to get overly political. Whether it's Congress, president, it doesn't matter what side you're on. Everybody throws stuff out, right, for each of their respective bases. And people just believe. Same thing here. Cannot believe I just made a correlation to our government. Anyway. Again, competitive advantage, and you are recommending information. So what can you ghost? You guys are all familiar with these, right? Size. Hey, release it as small. No, do as big, right? I mean, for all of you, sources sought are designed for small business, right? But if you think for a minute that large companies are not responding to those sources sought, you'd be mistaken. Because there are large companies that will respond to the sources sought and go, hey, CO, you really should be releasing this as full and open. There's no small companies that can really do this and do it well. Okay? And we'll talk more about that in a minute. We already talked the NAICS code. Make sure you understand the thresholds. For those of you that have a GSA schedule, what do you say? What do you recommend? I recommend you do this on GSA schedule, right? Or this MATOC or whatever. Those of you who don't have schedules, what do you say? Don't do it on GSA schedule. You're not going to get best value or whatever, right? You can ghost anything. Anything, think about what you sell, product or service, whatever it is that you go, you know what, we're really good at this. We're actually better than a lot of the other companies in the market. That's not enough. What makes you stronger? How do you communicate it? What are the metrics, right? And you ghost it. How are we doing on time? Okay, cool. First example. How many of you have a TS facility clearance? Very few, as expected. How many have secret facility clearance? Okay. There's a requirement, sources sought maybe, okay? And it has secret facility clearance as a requirement, okay? You know, we're all the companies here that are top secret though, right? They don't want those companies that have a secret facility clearance to be able to bid on this opportunity, right? There's fewer companies that have a TS facility than a secret facility. And so for some of these, I'm gonna read them. But, you know, hey, we recommend that change that clearance to top secret. And you can look through this, but it would ensure that the government is not required to expend internal resources or be forced to acquire additional contractor resources. What am I saying here? I'm saying it's gonna cost you more money. Hey, government, if you don't increase this to TS, it's probably going to cost you more down the road. Okay? ROI is a tricky thing, right? For the most part, dollars saved is not a strong ROI model in public sector. We can talk strategic sourcing, category management another time. However you communicate it, that's just one example. Anybody here CMMI certified? Yeah, there's one hand halfway up in the back. Think of whatever certifications you have. Okay, for all of these examples, if it doesn't apply to you, think of an example within your own business. Maybe it's a senior engineer or it's some AutoCAD certification, whatever it may be. But recommend. Even if they don't ask for it. Hey, listen, based on the requirements, you really should have, when folks are identifying key personnel, they need to have these certs, right? This example is a real example. There's a company that installs security equipment, CCTV, right? And by the way, all of you taking pictures, again, these will all be available afterwards. I know some of you just like taking. Are you guys tweeting those out? That would be really cool. It's RSM. All right. So this company, client from many years ago, they hadn't done any government, but they had done a whole bunch of school districts in California. And they had done intrusion detection and CCTV and a whole bunch of, the physical security for 3 buildings, 3 large school campuses. And so what they're saying here is, hey, yes, do small. And yeah, there's 100 small companies that can do it. But, you're revamping 3 different buildings supporting more than 5,000 guys. Even if the sources sought does not have this information, maybe the 5,000 government employees, look that up. Show them that you're doing your own research, right? We recommend asking for past performance that involves that complexity, right? With at least 2 interconnected buildings. So a lot of companies, yeah, we have this experience, but it's just 1 building at a time, right? Think from a construction perspective, if you're small, we have small little engagements, right? 150,000 here, 300,000 there, but there's a requirement, right? The Corps puts it out, and it's for, multi-geographical area. Well, translate your capability, you're ghosting the ability to say, hey, this is what we did commercially. You really should try to do it in this past performance. How many of you have a quality assurance, quality control process? Almost all of you, right? For those of you that don't, okay? Those of you that don't, you need to get one, okay? If it doesn't ask, let's say, for example, your company has a really strong QA/QC process, right? You already know a lot of companies don't have a strong process. Tell the contracting officer, in this example, hey, the most common mistake made in the development of these products is a failure to check for cracks on the chassis. Without reading the rest of it, the company that used this, their competitor, had cracks in all their chassis. Everybody in DoD knew that there were cracks in the chassis. This is you reminding the government, and hopefully they put this in and go, hey, make sure you have a really strong QA/QC, and if that gets into the RFP, you are torpedoing that other company. You are destroying them because the government is reminding everyone that this company has a problem with their QA and their QC. The quality control. So taking the weaknesses of your competition and saying, we don't have that problem, we're really good at it. But you're doing it indirectly. All right, those of you that have a GSA schedule, yep, hey, with more than 500 vendors, proven track records, you've already negotiated the pricing, it would be silly. It would be silly to not do it on schedule. For those of you who don't have a schedule, hey, why would you put it on schedule, right? Yes, there's several hundred, but did you know the industry has made certain changes in the last year or 2, right? And the odds are there aren't enough companies on schedule that have gone with those new industry best practices. So it makes sense that you not release it on GSA schedule. You don't lie, but I'm sure you can find some best practice that has changed in the last year, okay? And so, because obviously if it goes on schedule, you're never going to see it, right? That's ghosting. And then when you put it all together, right? Hey, industry has made a major shift. Schedule is not necessarily going to guarantee. Metrics, you're going to save upwards of this. Metrics, ease of access. Use this NAICS code. Recommend the government require bidders, outline, explain their QA/QC. And you put it all together. So what I just did is I took all those individual examples and I just created a narrative. And that's what you want to do when you respond. You don't have to just do this in a source of SALT response. What if you have a meeting with a government prospect, right? And you leave and you know, hey, you learned there's going to be these 4 task area groups, right? You can still ghost and make recommendations, just like you would in a source of SALT. How many of you have looked on FedBizOps and said, you look at an opportunity, you go, man, this has been wired for some other company? Boy, that's a lot of people going, yeah. But it's true, right? I mean, they say, what, 60, 70% of what you find on FedBizOps is wired for someone else. Why is it wired? Because those companies are either on site and talking to the government, or they are ghosting and influencing the acquisition. And they are focused in what phase? Pre-acquisition, non-acquisition. Okay? This template is downloadable. That's that third item that I showed you, right? So, you're going to have cover page. How much time do I have before Q&A? Cool. How many of you have been told, I'm going to go off on a tangent, how many of you are told do not use federal agency logos or armed service logos in your marketing material or on your website? Raise your hand. High. Okay. Everybody does it. No small business has ever been attacked for federal agencies do not come to you and go, oh, you need to take this off. Okay? You have 6 seconds. Capability statement, website, whatever it is. 6 seconds. If I'm a large prime and you come to me and you give me something, 6 seconds. I'm not reading your narrative. I'm not reading through all your stuff. If I want to learn about you, I'll talk to you, right? Face to face or on the phone. 6 seconds, I will see those federal agency logos. And I will say to myself, obviously past performance, obviously, maybe small, but they're doing something. Okay? My recommendation, always use them. Always use those logos for past performance. Again, 28 years. Nobody I've ever recommended this to's gotten in trouble. Primes, large companies, will sometimes say to a small business, you're not supposed to be using these logos. Take that off, right? And my comment back is, what are they focused on? Whether you use a logo or whether you're going to help them win a contract. Silly. You do the team, right? Who's on your team and your recommendations. Again, all that'll be in the document. So what did we learn today? How they perform the research, intelligence, I really drilled that in. Business intelligence is even more important than you responding to a source of SALT. How you approach it, don't answer every question, and a couple of examples on how to ghost. Before I turn it over to Q&A, a couple of things. First, if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, please do. I put out a lot of this kind of stuff on LinkedIn. Second, anybody here listen to Game Changers? I got one. Okay. We started this a year ago. It is now the #1 podcast in the country for government contractors. It's pretty cool. We're getting, I think we're almost 1,000 a week now. We interview experts across industry and government, and we talk about how to position for government contracts. So take a look. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. Manual, slides, templates. I'm not going to go through FA. If you're in all these techniques and strategies as part of FA, but I'm not allowed to sell from the stage. I'll leave it at that. And with that, thank you very much for spending your afternoon with me, and I will turn it over for Q&A. So what questions you got? Let's get a microphone.
Comment and a question. I'm from St. Louis, and I've met you
Yes!
on a few occasions.
Where in St. Louis?
Rock Hill.
Okay.
So I first met you maybe 2 years ago at an ICIC
Yes.
networking event. And I just want to say I've sort of seen Josh's success over the years, and he really knows what he's talking about. So thank you for being here today. My question is, does past performance only relate to government work?
Absolutely not. That's a great question. There are some contracts, right? RFPs, RFQs, what have you, that say you must have this, you must have government, you must have military past performance, right? Not most of them, right? If you are completely brand new and you have no government past performance, you are completely brand new. Yes, your commercial past performance is absolutely applicable. What if you've been in business for 1 week and you have no commercial past performance? What do you use? Your individual past performance when you worked for another company or your team, right? It's a little bit more difficult. It's how you position it. For those of you that have no government contracts, remember this percentage, 400%. You can increase your pipeline by 400% in terms of opportunities and value by subcontracting. And most small businesses get their first 3 or 4 contracts by subcontracting. Okay? So if you have no government past performance, your capture strategy for you young companies in the government space should be 30-70 or 40-60. 30% prime, 70% sub, or 40% prime, 60% sub. When I look at your pipeline, right, and I'll go one more step. If you're, since we're talking pipeline real quick, and more than you asked for, if your annual goal is $5 million, you small companies, 5-to-1 ratio. You better have $25 million in your pipeline by August 1st. And why August 1st? Because you have 60 days to work on the final ones before end of fiscal year, government, okay? So 5 million, 25 million in your pipeline, of which 40% is prime, 60% is sub. See, I go off on tangents. What other questions? Anybody? Yes, ma'am. Let's get a microphone. I see you sneaking out.
Where?
Right there.
Hello, I'm from the DMV area where there are literally thousands of contractors. And so if you're a small general, we've been told by a lot of the larger generals, well, we just don't have a place for you as a general. Mm-hmm. So how do you overcome that?
Wait, name and company?
Tanya, Red Cross Smith,
Okay.
JVN Corporation.
Excellent. Josh Frank, RS Federal. It's very common, very common. What I would say to you is, the challenge you're probably going through is what most companies go through. When you're talking to other companies, right, they can be larger primes or they can be other smalls, right? What do we all do? We say, hey, we're really good at what we do, right? We have past performance, right? We have great people and great process. Well, that's great. There's 1,000 companies just like yours that are saying the exact same thing. The way you get these larger companies and other companies to put you on the team is you have to change your focus, right? It's one of the things that I teach. It's not about what you sell. It's not about who you are. It's not about how great your services, products can be. One question and one question only. If you approach me, I'm going to look at you and think, are you going to make me more competitive? That's it. So when you approach other companies, it is not about who you are. It is about how can I communicate I'm going to make this company more competitive? How can I convince them that I can help them win? The only way to do that, there's no only way. The best way to do that is you must have intelligence. You got to have market information, okay? And so if I'm a large company, you come to me, the way it normally works is, you give your pitch, and I go, I just don't have I don't see a place for you, whatever. You interrupt and you go, hold on. Look, make yourself equal to your competition before you differentiate. Look, I know I'm like all these other companies. I know you're approached by 100 freaking companies, in the last 6 months. But I've been talking to the contracting officer. I've been talking to the government PM. I've been talking to whoever. And we've been collecting information over the last month or two that I think would make the team more competitive. Now, as soon as you say that to me, my question is going to be immediately what? What'd you hear? Yeah, who'd you talk to? What'd you hear? And what's the biggest mistake that small companies make? You tell them, right? The answer to that is, when you have that intelligence, right, is, hey, look, I would love to share that information with you, okay? But we have a corporate policy, just like your company. We don't share market intelligence unless we're under a teaming agreement. And that's the process. So I make it sound easy, but you need to shift your focus, that 80%, to pre-acquisition, collecting information and intelligence, getting on site, going to industry days. That way, when you're talking to all these other primes and other companies, and even when you respond yourself on proposals, you are more competitive. Any follow-up? Hold on, I got to get the mic to you.
We have attempted some of those strategies you mentioned. However, it just comes down to, how to really gather that information that everybody else doesn't have already to kind of open the door for you.
What is your first name?
Tanya.
Tanya, talk to me after the session.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll talk to you. Oh, yep.
Thank you. Warren Tennant with CB Design Group. A lot of you mentioned earlier about responding to a source's SOT within 24 hours of the phone call. We're finding a lot of them now, specifically, sometimes in bold and in capitals, say, do not phone the contracting officer. And so I'm wondering if there's a negative repercussion from that, or you would still recommend phoning them anyways.
Short answer to your question, you call. There is supposed to be a partnership between government and industry, okay? Yes, I know there used to be 100,000 contracting professionals, now there's like 30 or 40,000, I'm not sure what the number is, right? And that's when like DoD appropriations were 200, billion, and now it's tripled, 750, right? I get they're busy. But you cannot spend, this is my personal opinion, you cannot spend the amount of time and energy and money doing, capture and procurement and all that, and have your hands tied, right? I mean, yeah, I just saw a source of SOT this morning that said, do not call us, do not email us, we will be non-responsive. I saw one that said, you are completely restricted from talking to anybody other than the contracting specialist. Come on. We're spending tens of thousands of dollars to help you do this work, and you want to cut my knees off and not allow me to talk? Maybe I should just go back to commercial, right? The companies that are winning work, they ignore that. They ignore it. So look, a lot of the phone numbers, I've confirmed it with contracting officers. I'm not saying the Corps of Engineers, just government in general. Those phone numbers on FBO, right? There's a good number that go to empty offices, right? They do. So what should you do for that? I'm going off on a tangent. Government buildings are sequential normally. Dial one number up and one number down. And when you get somebody, go, oh, I'm sorry, I was trying to get married. That works very well. Just FYI. Okay, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
This will have to be the last one.
No.
Yes.
Thank you. Michelle Hickson, My Joy Industrial Services, we're based in Atlanta. We do construction management. And what I've been finding at the conference is we do perform services in the Department of Aviation space. These are federally funded projects. And talking with people here, they're asking me if I have past performance in the federal market. I consider my performance in the federal market because they're funded through federal funds. Am I accurate?
Say that one more time.
So because I do aviation and US DOT work, these are all federally funded projects.
At a state level?
Correct.
Okay.
Can I consider that past performance?
Yes and yes. It's all about how you position it. It's how you market it. How I would describe my past performance would be different as depending on whether I'm talking to a teaming partner, whether I'm talking to a contracting officer, I'm responding in a source of sought, right? In a source of sought, you're not winning anything. Whose phone is that? Raise your hand.
I have no idea what that just
That was. Here, what's your first name?
Kelly.
Kelly, can you stand up for a minute? That is one of the best ringtones I've heard in a long time.
I have no idea what
Kelly, Kelly, Kelly. Yes. Okay, so it is Halloween. I'm going to let everybody go. I'm going to stay after for about an hour. My wife and I are going to be going to Bourbon Street. See me right after. Kelly, it's Kelly's fault. Anyway, I've got some marketing stuff, business cards up here. If you want something, grab it. Otherwise, just hit the URL, and thank you very much. It's posted now. Right there. Yeah. Thank you. Hey, I forgot, everybody that's walking out, your reviews of this session is what brings me back next year. So please put in if you didn't like my session, don't leave any feedback.